The judge ordered the street girl to be removed from the courtroom, but what the millionaire said changed everything when she spoke. The silence of the courtroom was broken only by the distant sound of rain hitting the windows of the central courthouse of Birmingham. It was one of those muggy mornings where the heavy sky reflected the weight of the decisions to come. Judge Eleanor Vance, known for her strictness and punctuality, was already in her chair, reviewing the case files that had garnered unusual attention among court staff. The lawsuit was simple on paper. It was about deciding the fate of a minor found living on the streets and under the informal care of an elderly woman with no legal ties to the child. But one only had to look around the room to realize that the case was far from simple. Sitting on one of the farthest benches, Teresa Dawson, 63 years old, kept her back straight, her eyes alert, despite the evident fatigue on her face. She wore modest clothes, her hands calloused from daily work with recycling, and held firmly the bag containing the documents she had managed to gather. Beside her, barefoot and in the cleanest dress they had managed to provide, was Anna Clare, the girl with big eyes and unruly hair who months earlier had slept among cardboard boxes in the city centre. Since finding her alone under a canopy, Teresa had cared for her with what she could offer: simple food, an old mattress on the floor of her room, words of affection, and stories before bed. She had never sought recognition, only believed that no child should grow up alone. The problem, in the eyes of the law, was that Anna Clare was not officially her granddaughter, nor her daughter, nor her ward. She was just a girl whose fate the state was now deciding, whether she should go to a shelter, as there was no documentary evidence of their relationship. The prosecutor argued that, despite the woman's good intentions, the fact that the minor was not enrolled in school, had no medical follow-up, and no formal guardianship documentation could not be ignored. The protocol, she stated, was clear. The girl should be removed and sent to the care of the municipal social services. Teresa knew that fighting the system was like shouting into the wind, but she was there nonetheless. Her hands were sweating. The judge leafed through the documents with an impassive gaze. Anna Clare, uncomfortable in her tight clothes, swung her feet on the bench. When the judge raised her eyes and cast a direct look at the girl, tension condensed in the room. And then, without ceremony, came the order no one expected to hear so soon. Remove the minor from the room. The impact of the phrase was like a punch. Teresa gasped for breath, but the judge had already returned her eyes to the papers. A security guard approached the girl. Anna Clare looked confused at Teresa, who tried to stand up, but was restrained by her own exhausted body and an embarrassment greater than she could bear. It was as if a piece of her was being torn away. The security guard began to move, and it was then that a firm and unexpected male voice echoed through the room. "Your Honor, I ask that you allow the girl to remain." Everyone turned. Sitting discreetly in the back rows, a well-dressed man in a tailored suit was standing up. It was Charles Henry Barton, a technology entrepreneur, a widely known figure in the local business community for his meteoric career and his punctual philanthropic actions. The judge raised her eyebrows, surprised by the presence of someone like him in a hearing of that type. It was not common for a man of his position to be involved in child custody issues or social processes. He walked to the front with calm steps, ignoring the whispers that popped up in the corners of the room. He asked for permission to speak, and it was granted. What he revealed next would leave everyone perplexed. He said he had met Anna Clare weeks earlier, when she was cleaning windshields at a traffic light near his office. That day, impressed by the way the girl articulated words and the naturalness with which she spoke about books she should never have had access to, he stopped the car, got out, and talked to her for long minutes. He felt there was something different about that child. Back at the company, he instructed his team to discreetly investigate her origins. The investigation results revealed a tragic story. Anna Clare was the daughter of Marlene Christine Davies, a former domestic worker who had worked for Charles's family years earlier. Marlene had disappeared under nebulous circumstances, leaving her very young daughter alone. Hospital records from the time indicated Marlene's hospitalization days before her departure, but no information had been passed on to official agencies about the existence of a daughter. For years, Anna Clare had survived with sporadic help, until she was taken in by Teresa. Furthermore, Charles presented a yellowed envelope, which had been found among old documents stored in a deposit at his mother's house. Inside it was a handwritten letter from Marlene, addressed to Teresa, in a farewell tone. In the letter, Marlene said she was ill and asked that, should anything happen to her, Teresa take care of Anna Claire. Despite its informality, the letter showed the relationship of trust between the two women and the explicit intention that the girl not be left to chance. The judge asked to examine the envelope and, after a quick verification, realized that the letter had a date, signature, and witness. The prosecution, now visibly disconcerted, questioned the document's validity. But Charles retorted, also presenting a legal opinion that attested to the recognition of the signature by a notary public. The hearing, previously silent, had turned into a field of growing tension. And the most important voice was still missing, Anna Claire's own. After a brief pause, the judge, now visibly less rigid, authorized the girl to speak. Anna Claire stood up shyly but without fear. In simple words, she told how she had met Teresa, how she had been cared for even without a blood tie, how she slept on a mattress shared with the woman's cats, how she had received a handmade dress and learned to read with old magazines Teresa rescued from the trash. She said she had never had a real family until she met that woman. The emotion in the room was palpable. Anna Claire was not asking for pity. She was asking to continue living where she had found dignity. At the end of the testimony, the judge asked everyone to leave the room for a few minutes. The silence was now full of expectation. Teresa remained seated, immobile, as if each second were an eternity. Charles waited discreetly, without needing to say anything more. He had already done his part. When everyone returned, the decision was still to come, but something had changed in the atmosphere. The narrative had been turned. Prejudice had been confronted by facts, and the judge's gaze now carried something that had not existed before: humanity. The room remained in absolute silence as Judge Eleanor Vance adjusted her glasses and returned to examining the documents scattered on the table. She was not known for hesitating. Her reputation had been built over decades of quick, well-founded, and often merciless decisions. But at that moment, something different hung in the air. Perhaps it was Anna Claire's gaze, still standing, awaiting an answer that could change her life forever. Perhaps it was the unexpected presence of Charles Henry, whose intervention had brought to light a truth no one had imagined existed. Or perhaps it was simply the weight of the responsibility of deciding the fate of a child who, despite all adversity, had found a home. Teresa, for her part, could not control the trembling in her hands. She knew that this moment would define everything. It wasn't just about Anna Claire's guardianship. It was about validating years of care, of love without expecting anything in return, of sleepless nights when the girl had a fever, of sharing the little she had so the child wouldn't go hungry. It was about proving that family is not defined only by blood ties, but by choices, by presence, by true affection. The prosecutor, still visibly annoyed by the turn the case had taken, tried to regain control of the situation. She stood up and in a firm voice argued that, despite the letter presented by Charles Henry and the girl's emotional testimony, there were still legal issues that could not be ignored. Teresa did not have stable financial conditions, did not own her own property, lived from recycling, and could not guarantee the child's educational and medical future. According to her, the state had a duty to ensure that Anna Claire had access to opportunities that a woman of limited resources could not offer. The prosecutors. Words echoed through the room like a premature sentence. Teresa felt her heart tighten. She knew that in the eyes of the law she was just a poor, uneducated woman, without material possessions. But she also knew that she had given Anna Claire something no shelter could offer, a place where she was loved, where her existence mattered, where she was not just another number on a list of forgotten children. Charles Henry, who until then had remained silent after his initial intervention, asked to speak again. The judge, curious as to what else he might say, granted it. He walked to the center of the room, and his voice, though calm, carried a determination that made everyone pay attention. Your Honor, I understand the concerns raised by the prosecution. Indeed, Teresa Dawson does not possess abundant financial resources. but I would like to propose a solution that meets both the minor's interests and legal requirements. I am willing to fully cover Anna Claire's education, including enrollment in a quality school, school supplies, uniform, and pedagogical support. Additionally, I will provide a comprehensive health plan for both her and Teresa, ensuring they both have access to adequate medical care. I also commit to assisting in the regularization of the girl's documentation and providing monthly financial support so that Teresa can offer the child a dignified life, without this meaning Anna Claire's removal from the only home she knows. The impact of Charles's words was immediate. The prosecutor was speechless. The judge raised her eyebrows, clearly surprised by the proposal. Teresa, for her part, could not hold back her tears. She never imagined that someone like Charles Henry, a man from another world, from another reality, could care so much about the fate of a girl he barely knew. But the question hanging in the air was inevitable. Why? Why would a successful entrepreneur with so many responsibilities and commitments be willing to invest time, money, and energy in a child with no direct connection to him? The judge, sensing the same doubt everyone in the room shared, decided to ask the question directly. Mr. Charles Henry, your proposal is generous and undoubtedly worthy of recognition. However, I need to understand your motivations. You mentioned that Anna Claire is the daughter of a former employee of your family, but that in itself does not justify such deep involvement. Is there anything else you would like to share? Charles hesitated for a brief moment. His eyes turned to Anna Claire, who watched him with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. He took a deep breath, and for the first time since entering the room, allowed genuine emotion to show on his face. Your Honor, the truth is that Marlene Christine Davies was not just an employee of my family. For many years, she was the person who took care of me when I was a child. My mother, busy with social commitments and travels, delegated the responsibility of raising me to Marlene. It was she who taught me to read, who comforted me when I had nightmares, who prepared my breakfast every day. Marlene was, in many ways, more of a mother to me than my own biological mother. When she left our house years later, I lost contact with her. I never knew she had a daughter. I never knew she had gone through difficulties, and that still weighs on me today. I feel I failed her. I wasn't there when she needed me. But now, discovering that Anna Claire exists, that she is the daughter of the woman who raised me, I feel I have an opportunity to right that wrong. I cannot bring Marlene back, but I can ensure her daughter has the life she would have wanted for her. The silence that followed was dense, charged with emotion. Teresa wept openly. Anna Claire, still not fully understanding the magnitude of what was happening, felt that something important was unfolding. The judge, visibly touched by the account, removed her glasses and ran a hand over her face, as if trying to process everything she had heard. The prosecutor, realizing she had completely lost control of the narrative, attempted one last push. She argued that regardless of Charles Henry's personal motivations, the law required that guardianship of a minor be granted only to those with proven ability to raise them. Teresa, she claimed, still did not meet these requirements, even with the promised financial support. But the judge, now with a softer expression, raised her hand, interrupting the prosecutor. She said she needed more time to analyze all the elements presented and would make her decision after careful consideration. She ruled that Anna Claire would remain under Teresa's care until the next hearing, which would be scheduled in 2 weeks. Additionally, she ordered a social worker to visit Teresa's residence to assess living conditions and prepare a detailed report. The hearing was adjourned and everyone began to leave. Teresa, still in shock, was approached by Charles Henry, who extended his hand and said sincerely that he would do everything in his power to ensure Anna Claire remained with her. Teresa, speechless, just squeezed his hand tightly, as if to convey all the gratitude she felt. Anna Claire, holding Teresa's hand, looked at Charles and, with a child's innocence, asked if he had really known her mother. Charles knelt to her, level and with a sad smile confirmed it. He said Marlene was an extraordinary woman and that Anna Claire should be proud to be her daughter. The girl smiled, and in that smile, Charles saw a reflection of the woman who had been so important in his life. In the days following the hearing, Teresa and Anna Claire's lives underwent transformations they never imagined possible. Charles Henry kept his word with impressive speed. The very next day, a team of social workers hired by him visited Teresa's modest house, located in a simple neighborhood on the outskirts of Birmingham. The residence was humble with peeling walls and old furniture, but it was clean and organized. Anna Claire had her own little corner, decorated with drawings she had made and taped to the walls. The social worker assigned by the court, Miss Lucy, a middle-aged woman with an attentive gaze and professional demeanor, arrived on a Tuesday morning. Teresa received her nervously, offering coffee and cheese bread she had prepared especially for the occasion. Miss Lucy accepted, and as she savored the coffee, she observed every detail of the house. She asked questions about Anna Claire's routine, about food, hygiene, sleeping, hours. Teresa answered everything honestly, without trying to hide the difficulties she faced, but also making clear the love and care she dedicated to the girl. Anna Claire, in turn, showed the social worker her drawing notebooks, the books Teresa had managed to get through donations, and spoke with enthusiasm about the stories the elderly woman told before bed. Ms. Lucy, who had visited hundreds of homes throughout her career, perceived something that reports and documents could not capture. There was genuine affection in that house. There was a bond. There was family. At the end of the visit, Miss Lucy thanked them for their hospitality and said she would prepare her report based on what she had observed. Teresa, anxious, asked if there was anything she should improve. The social worker smiled and said that, in terms of love and dedication, there was nothing to improve. However, she acknowledged that some structural improvements to the house would be beneficial, especially regarding Anna Claire's room and general living conditions. Charles Henry, when informed of the social worker's observations, did not hesitate. He hired a small renovation team, and in less than a week, Teresa's house underwent a transformation. The walls were painted, the roof was repaired, new furniture was installed, and Anna Claire got a real bed, with new sheets and a wardrobe where she could store the clothes that were also provided. Teresa, watching it all happen, couldn't believe it. She felt like she was in a dream, but at the same time she feared waking up and discovering that none of it was real. Meanwhile, Charles Henry also arranged for Anna Claire's enrollment in a quality private school located in a more central district of Birmingham. The school's headmistress, Miss Beatrice, an experienced educator passionate about her work, personally welcomed the girl and Teresa. She explained the teaching methodology, showed them the facilities, and assured them that Anna Claire would receive all the necessary support to adapt, as she had spent years without attending formal school. Anna Claire, upon seeing the school library, was amazed. She had never seen so many books together. Miss Beatrice, noticing the girl's enchantment, said she could read as many books as she wanted, and that, if she had questions, there would always be someone willing to help her. Teresa, observing the scene, felt a mixture of pride and relief. She knew she was offering Anna Claire something she herself had never had, the chance to study, to learn, to dream of a different future. But not everything was rosy. News of Anna Claire's case had spread through the community where Teresa lived. Some neighbors, driven by envy or misunderstanding, began to make malicious comments. They said Teresa was taking advantage of the situation, that she had allied herself with a rich man to benefit, that the girl would be taken from her as soon as the businessman tired of funding everything. The gossip reached Teresa's ears, and despite being hurt, she tried to ignore it. She knew she couldn't control what others thought or said, but that didn't make the words any less painful. Anna Claire, for her part, began attending school and, despite initial nervousness, adapted quickly. She was an intelligent, curious child, eager to learn. The teachers were impressed with her ability to absorb knowledge and her determination to make up for lost time. She made friends, participated in extracurricular activities, and for the first time in her life felt part of something bigger. Charles Henry, who had promised to closely monitor Anna Claire's development, visited the school regularly. He spoke with the teachers, checked on the girls' performance, and, whenever possible, stopped by Teresa's house to see how they were doing. These visits, though brief, became important for everyone. Anna Claire began to see him as a paternal figure, someone she could trust. Teresa, in turn, felt grateful, but also a little insecure. She feared that, over time, Charles might want to assume a greater role in Anna Claire's life, and that she, Teresa, would be left aside. These insecurities were fueled by an unexpected event. During one of Charles's visits, he mentioned that he had spoken with his lawyers about the possibility of requesting shared custody of Anna Claire. He said he didn't want to take the girl away from Teresa, but that he would like to have an official role in her upbringing, something legally recognized. The proposal, though made with good intentions, left Teresa deeply shaken. She said nothing at the time, only nodded, but inwardly she felt she was about to lose the only family she had. That night, after Charles left, Teresa couldn't sleep. She sat in the kitchen drinking tea and replaying everything that had happened in recent months. She thought of Marlene, the letter she had left, the request she had made. She thought of Anna Claire, the frightened girl she had found on the street, and the confident child she was becoming. And she thought of herself, of all she had sacrificed, of all the sleepless nights, of all the shared meals. Would all this be enough to ensure Anna Claire stayed with her? Or would the law, in the end, side with those who had money and influence? Anna Claire, who had woken up to get water, found Teresa in the kitchen and asked if she was okay. Teresa, trying to hide her tears, said yes, she was just tired. The girl sat beside her and, with the unexpected wisdom of someone who had already faced many adversities, said that no matter what happened, she would always be grateful to Teresa for taking her in when no one else cared. Those simple, sincere words were like a balm to Teresa's wounded heart. She hugged Anna Claire tightly and promised herself that she would fight to the end to keep that girl by her side. Meanwhile, Charles Henry also faced his own dilemmas. His decision to get involved in Anna Claire's case had generated repercussions in his personal and professional life. His mother, Mrs. Helen Barton, a 70-year-old woman, elegant and accustomed to the privileges of high society, did not approve of her son's involvement in that situation. She argued that Charles had responsibilities to the company, to the family, and that he should not waste time and resources on a child who was not his responsibility. The relationship between Charles and Mrs. Helen had always been complicated. He respected her, but he had never felt the affection a mother should offer. Marlene, the housekeeper who had raised him, had filled that void. And now, by helping Anna Claire, Charles felt that he was in some way honoring the memory of the woman who had truly loved him. Mrs. Helen, realizing she couldn't dissuade her son, decided to take matters into her own hands. She hired a private investigator to find out more about Teresa Dawson and the circumstances that had led Anna Claire to live with her. She wanted to find something, anything that she could use to convince Charles that the situation was unhealthy and that he should distance himself. The investigator, an experienced and discreet man, began to delve into Teresa's past. He spoke with neighbors, checked public records, investigated her life story. What he discovered, however, was not what Mrs. Helen expected. Teresa Dawson was a woman of impeccable reputation, hard-working, honest, known in the community for helping those in need, even with so little herself. There were no scandals, no dark secrets, just a life of struggle, sacrifice, and dignity. But the investigator also discovered something that caught his attention. Teresa had a son, Robert Dawson, who had left Birmingham years ago and with whom she had no contact. Robert had gotten involved with bad company in his youth and, after some problems, decided to start a new life in another region. Teresa, hurt by her son's choices, but never ceasing to love him, had lost contact. The investigator reported this information to Mrs. Helen, who saw an opportunity in it. If Teresa had a son who had abandoned her, Mrs. Helen argued, that could be used to question her ability to raise a child. After all, if she couldn't keep her own son close, how could she ensure that Anna Claire would have a stable future? It was a weak argument, Mrs. Helen knew, but it was all she had. Charles, when confronted by his mother with this information, was furious. He said he would not allow her to use Teresa's past against her, that everyone made mistakes, that everyone had difficult stories. Mrs. Helen, surprised by her son's reaction, backed down but did not give up completely. She knew there was still time until the next hearing, and that if she wanted to protect her son from what she considered a mistake, she would have to act more subtly. As these tensions unfolded behind the scenes, the date of the second hearing approached. Teresa, Anna Claire, and Charles Henry prepared, each in their own way, for what could be the most important day of their lives. Judge Eleanor Vance's decision would define not only Anna Claire's legal future, but also the emotional fate of everyone involved. Teresa prayed every night, asking for strength and wisdom. Anna Claire, without fully understanding the gravity of the situation, just wanted everything to continue as it was. And Charles Henry, torn between the desire to honor Marlene's memory and the pressure from his own family, sought the best way to ensure the girl had the life she deserved, without causing more pain to Teresa. The city of Birmingham continued its rhythm, indifferent to the personal dramas unfolding in its courts and homes. But for those three people, the world had narrowed to a single question: what would justice decide? And more importantly, what would truly be just? The morning of the second hearing dawned with a clear sky over Birmingham, contrasting with the storm of emotions engulfing Teresa Dawson. She had spent the previous night awake, mentally replaying everything that could be said, everything that could happen. Anna Claire, on the contrary, had slept soundly, confident that everything would turn out well. The child's innocence was both a comfort and a burden for Teresa, who knew that the outcome of that hearing was far from guaranteed. Charles Henry also prepared for the decisive day. He had reviewed all documents, all evidence, all arguments that could be presented with his lawyers. But unlike other legal battles he had faced throughout his business career, this one was not about contracts or deals. It was about a girl who represented the only connection he still had with the woman who had raised him. It was about correcting a past mistake, about honoring an emotional debt that could never be repaid with money. Mrs. Helen Barton, Charles's mother, would also be present at the hearing. She had insisted on accompanying her son, claiming she wanted to better understand the situation, but Charles knew her intentions were otherwise. Mrs. Helen had never approved of his involvement in that case, and despite backing down after their argument, he knew she wouldn't easily give up trying to protect him from what she considered a mistake. When Teresa and Anna Claire arrived at the central courthouse, some people were already waiting. The social worker, Ms. Lucy, was there, with her report in hand. Charles Henry arrived minutes later, accompanied by his lawyers and Mrs. Helen, who observed everything with a critical eye. The prosecutor was also present, reviewing her arguments and preparing to defend the state's position. Judge Eleanor Vance entered the room punctually as usual. Her face maintained the same serious and impartial expression, but there was something different in her eyes. Perhaps it was the weight of responsibility, or perhaps it was the impact the case had had on her since the first hearing. She asked everyone to sit down, and after a brief review of the files began the session. The first to speak was Ms. Lucy, the social worker. She presented her report clearly and objectively, describing the conditions of Teresa's house, Anna Claire's routine, and the improvements that had been implemented with Charles Henry's support. Ms. Lucy emphasized that, despite the initial financial limitations, Teresa had demonstrated exemplary care for the girl. The house, though simple, was clean and organized. Anna Claire was well-fed, healthy, and most importantly, happy. The emotional bond between the two was evident and genuine. However, Ms. Lucy also mentioned that she had received information about Teresa's past, specifically about her son, Robert, who had left the family years ago. She questioned whether this fact could indicate any difficulty Teresa had in maintaining stable family ties. The question, though asked professionally, hit Teresa like a knife. She felt her face burn with shame and pain. Robert was a subject she avoided at all costs, a wound that had never fully healed. The judge, noticing Teresa's discomfort, asked if she would like to comment on the matter. Teresa, her voice choked with emotion, stood up and for the first time spoke openly about her son. She said that Robert had been a good boy, but that he had gotten involved with the wrong friends in adolescence. She had tried everything to help him, but he had chosen a different path. When he decided to leave Birmingham, Teresa did not stop him, believing that it might be better for him to start over away from negative influences. But the separation had been painful, and the silence that followed even more so. Teresa admitted that she might have failed as a mother, but said she had learned from her mistakes and would never allow Anna Claire to go through what Robert had gone through. She would ensure the girl had love, structure, and opportunities. Teresa's testimony was emotional and sincere. Even the prosecutor, who until then had maintained a rigid stance, seemed touched. The judge thanked her and asked Teresa to sit down. Then she gave the floor to Charles Henry, who had requested permission to speak. Charles stood up and, in a firm voice, reiterated his commitment to support Anna Claire and Teresa. He said he understood the concerns raised, but that he believed Teresa's past should not be used against her. Everyone made mistakes. Everyone faced challenges. What mattered was the present and the future. And in the present, Anna Claire was being cared for with love and dedication. In the future, with the support he was willing to offer, the girl would have all the opportunities she deserved. Charles also mentioned that he had spoken with his lawyers about the possibility of formalizing his support through a legal agreement, where he would commit to covering Anna Claire's education and care, without this meaning the removal of guardianship from Teresa. He proposed that a shared guardianship be established, where Teresa would maintain primary guardianship, but he would have the right to monitor the girl's development and participate in important decisions related to her education and health. Charles's proposal was met with mixed reactions. The prosecutor argued that shared guardianship was uncommon in cases like that, and that it would be necessary to assess whether it would truly serve the minor's best interests. Teresa, for her part, felt conflicted. On one hand, she was grateful for Charles's support. On the other, she feared that by accepting shared guardianship, she would be giving up part of her authority over Anna Claire. It was then that Mrs. Helen Barton, who, until that moment, had remained silent, asked for permission to speak. The judge, surprised, granted it. Mrs. Helen stood up elegantly and in a firm and polite voice addressed the judge. "Your Honor, I am Helen Barton, Charles Henry's mother. I would like to express my concern about the situation being proposed. My son is a good-hearted man, and I admire his intention to help. However, I fear that he is getting involved in a situation that could lead to future complications. Anna Claire is a child who needs stability, a defined home, a structured family. I fear that shared guardianship between a woman of limited resources and my son, who has an extremely demanding professional life, could generate conflicts and instability for the girl. Perhaps the most sensible course would be for Anna Claire to be placed with a family that could offer everything she needs without relying on informal arrangements or financial agreements." Mrs. Helen's words dropped like a bomb. Charles was visibly irritated, but before he could respond, Teresa stood up, trembling with emotion. She looked directly at Mrs. Helen, and with a courage that surprised everyone, responded, "You talk about stability, structured family, resources. But do you know what it's like to go to bed hungry? Do you know what it's like to have no one in the world who cares if you're alive or not? Anna Claire knows. She lived it. And when I found her, I didn't ask if she had money, if she had a rich family, if she had a guaranteed future. I just took her in because it was the right thing to do, and since then, I've given her everything I had. My time, my affection, my home, my life. It may not be much in your eyes, but for Anna Claire it was everything. And if you think money is more important than love, then you've never understood what it means to be a real mother." The silence that followed was absolute. Mrs. Helen, accustomed to being treated with deference and respect, was speechless. Charles, proud of Teresa's courage, smiled discreetly. The judge, visibly impressed, asked everyone to calm down. The prosecutor, realizing the hearing was taking unexpected turns, tried to regain control. She argued that, regardless of the emotions involved, the decision should be based on objective criteria. Anna Claire needed education, health, security. And although Teresa had shown love and dedication, the prosecutor questioned whether this would be sufficient in the long term, especially if Charles Henry's support was not properly formalized. The judge, after hearing all arguments, said she needed a moment to reflect. She asked everyone to wait while she analyzed the documents and statements presented. Time seemed to drag. Teresa prayed in silence. Anna Claire, feeling the tension in the air, held Teresa's hand tightly. Charles remained calm, but inwardly he was anxious. Mrs. Helen, still shaken by the confrontation with Teresa, remained silent. After about 20 minutes, the judge returned and asked everyone to stand. She began her decision slowly, explaining that cases like that were always complex, as they involved not only legal but also emotional and social issues. She said she had carefully analyzed all the elements presented: the social worker's report, the testimonies, Charles Henry's proposals, and the concerns raised by the prosecution and Mrs. Helen. The judge acknowledged that Teresa, despite her financial limitations, had demonstrated exemplary care for Anna Claire. The bond between them was real and deep. However, she also recognized that the girl needed guarantees that she would have access to education, health, and opportunities that Teresa alone could not offer. On the other hand, the shared guardianship proposal presented by Charles Henry, although generous, raised questions about how it would be implemented in practice and whether it would truly serve the minor's best interests. Given this, the judge made a decision that surprised everyone. She ruled that Anna Claire's guardianship would be maintained with Teresa Dawson, officially recognizing her as the girl's legal guardian. However, she established some conditions. First, Charles Henry would be appointed as an auxiliary guardian, with the responsibility of ensuring the necessary financial support for Anna Claire's education and health. Second, a monitoring plan would be created, where the social worker would visit Teresa's residence every 3 months to assess the girl's well-being. Third, any important decision related to Anna Claire's education or health should be made jointly by Teresa and Charles, ensuring that both had an active voice. The decision was met with mixed emotions. Teresa, relieved to maintain Anna Claire's guardianship, cried with joy. Anna Claire, without fully understanding what had happened, only knew that she would stay with Teresa, and that was all that mattered to her. Charles, satisfied with the outcome, thanked the judge and promised to comply with all the established conditions. The prosecutor, though not completely satisfied, acknowledged that the decision was fair and balanced. Mrs. Helen, for her part, remained silent, clearly dissatisfied, but unable to do anything to change the result. The hearing was adjourned and everyone began to leave. Teresa, still in shock, was approached by Charles, who congratulated her and said he was eager to start working together for Anna Claire's well-being. Teresa, with tears in her eyes, thanked him and said she would never forget what he had done for them. Anna Claire, holding Teresa's hand, looked at Charles and said with a smile that she was happy to have gained not only a mother but also a godfather. Charles, touched by the girl's words, knelt down and said he would do everything in his power to ensure she had the best life possible. As they left the courthouse, Teresa felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She had won the legal battle, but she knew she would now face new challenges. She would have to learn to share decisions with Charles. She would have to deal with the social worker's visits. She would have to prove every day that she was capable of caring for Anna Claire. But looking at the girl beside her, smiling and chattering about school, Teresa knew that everything would be worth it. Charles, in turn, also reflected on what had happened. He had made a commitment that would change his life. He would no longer be just a businessman focused on deals and profits. Now, he had an emotional responsibility, a connection to the past he had tried to forget. Marlene, the woman who had raised him, would be proud. He was sure of it. Mrs. Helen, upon leaving the courthouse, did not say a word to her son. She got into her car and left, leaving Charles alone. He knew that his relationship with his mother had become even more complicated, but he did not regret his choices. For the first time in a long time, he felt he was doing something that truly mattered. In the days following the hearing, Teresa and Anna Claire's lives began to adjust to the new reality. Anna Claire continued attending school, where her performance impressed the teachers. She had become one of the best students in her class, especially in reading and writing. Miss Beatrice, the headmistress, commented to Charles that the girl had a natural talent for storytelling and should be encouraged to develop that skill. Charles, taking the suggestion seriously, enrolled Anna Claire in a children's theatre course where she could explore her creativity and expression. The girl loved it. For the first time, she had a space where she could be herself, where she could imagine, create, dream. Teresa, seeing Anna Claire's happiness, felt that all the sacrifices had been worth it. But not everything was perfect. The relationship between Teresa and Charles, though cordial, still had its tensions. Teresa, accustomed to making all decisions alone, sometimes felt uncomfortable when Charles suggested changes or expressed opinions about Anna Claire's upbringing. She knew he had good intentions, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing some of her autonomy. Charles, for his part, tried to be respectful and not impose his ideas, but he also felt he had the right to actively participate in Anna Claire's life, especially considering the financial support he was offering. There were times when he wondered if he had made the right choice, if it wouldn't have been simpler to just offer financial support without getting emotionally involved. These tensions came to a head during a school meeting, where Ms. Beatrice summoned Teresa and Charles to discuss Anna Claire's educational future. The headmistress suggested that the girl be transferred to a more advanced class, as her performance was above average. Charles immediately agreed, believing it would be a great opportunity for Anna Claire. Teresa, however, hesitated. She feared that the change might put too much pressure on the girl, that she might feel out of place among older classmates. The disagreement led to a moment of tension. Charles argued that Anna Claire was intelligent and capable, and that underestimating her would be a mistake. Teresa retorted that she knew the girl better than anyone, and knew when she was ready for new challenges and when she wasn't. Ms. Beatrice, sensing the conflict, suggested they talk to Anna Claire and hear her opinion. When asked, the girl said she would like to try the advanced class, but was afraid she wouldn't be able to keep up. Teresa, hearing the insecurity in Anna Claire's voice, proposed an intermediate solution. The girl would try the advanced class for 2 weeks, and if she felt comfortable, she would stay. Otherwise, she would return to her original class. Charles agreed, and the tension dissipated. This episode made both realize that they would have to learn to work together, to respect each other's opinions, and to always put Anna Claire's interests first. It wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. Meanwhile, Mrs. Helen remained dissatisfied with the situation. She couldn't accept that her son was so involved with a child who, in her eyes, had no real connection to the family. She decided then to take a more drastic step. She hired the private investigator again and asked him to look for Robert, Teresa's son. Mrs. Helen believed that if she could find him and bring him back to Birmingham, she could use that to destabilize Teresa's guardianship. After all, if Teresa's own son returned and wanted to reconcile, that could create complications in the woman's life and consequently affect her ability to care for Anna Claire. The investigator accepted the task and began tracking Robert. He discovered that he was living in Sheffield, working as a mechanic in a small garage. Robert had managed to rebuild his life, away from the bad influences that had affected him in Birmingham. He had a stable job, a modest apartment, and apparently had left the past behind. Mrs. Helen, upon receiving this information, instructed the investigator to contact Robert and plant the idea that his mother was in difficulties and that he should return to help her. The investigator, though uncomfortable with the manipulation, followed orders. He called Robert, introduced himself as someone investigating Teresa's situation, and mentioned that she was involved in a complicated legal process related to a child's guardianship. Robert, hearing about his mother, felt a mixture of guilt and concern. He hadn't spoken to Teresa in years, and the idea that she might be in trouble deeply bothered him. He decided he needed to return to Birmingham, at least to understand what was happening and, if possible, help. Meanwhile, Teresa and Anna Claire continued their lives, oblivious to the plot being woven behind the scenes. Teresa had finally begun to feel secure, to believe that the worst was over. Anna Claire was happy, healthy, and full of dreams. And Charles, despite occasional tensions, felt he was fulfilling the promise he had made to himself to honor Marlene's memory. But the tranquility was about to be shaken. Robert was on his way to Birmingham, and his arrival would bring to light secrets, grudges, and conflicts that had been buried for years. The story of Teresa, Anna Claire, and Charles was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to reveal its deepest and most complex layers. Robert Dawson's arrival in Birmingham occurred on a rainy Thursday afternoon. He had travelled by bus from Sheffield, a long and tiring journey that had given him plenty of time to think about what he would find upon arrival. It had been over 8 years since he had seen his mother, and the guilt he carried for having abandoned her weighed like a stone in his chest. All that time, he had thought of returning, of asking for forgiveness, of trying to rebuild the relationship he had destroyed with his wrong choices. But pride and shame always prevented him. Now, however, the situation was different. According to the investigator who had contacted him, Teresa was involved in a complicated legal process. Robert didn't know exactly what it was about, but the idea that his mother might be in trouble was unbearable. He needed to be there, he needed to help, even if it meant facing the past he had tried so hard to forget. As he got off the bus at Birmingham's coach station, Robert felt a wave of nostalgia. The city had changed, but it still held the essence he knew. He took a taxi and gave the address of the house where he had grown up, in the neighborhood where Teresa still lived. During the ride, he observed the streets, the buildings, the people. Everything seemed both familiar and strange. When the taxi stopped in front of the house, Robert was surprised. The residence looked different. The walls, once peeling, were painted. The gate, which had been rusty, had been replaced. There were flowers in the small front garden, something that had never existed when he lived there. For a moment, he thought he might have come to the wrong address. But no, it was indeed the place. He got out of the taxi, grabbed his backpack and walked to the door. He took a deep breath and knocked. He heard footsteps on the other side, and seconds later, the door opened. Teresa was there, older, with more wrinkles, but still with the same firm gaze he remembered. For an instant, both stood paralyzed, not knowing what to say. Robert was the first to break the silence. He said, his voice choked with emotion, that he had returned, that he needed to talk to her. Teresa, still in shock, took a step back, allowing him to enter. She said nothing, just watched him as he walked into the house that had once been his. Anna Claire, who was drawing in the living room, looked up when she saw the unknown man. She asked who he was, and Teresa, her voice trembling, replied that he was her son. The girl, curious, asked if he was staying, and Teresa said she didn't know that they needed to talk. Robert looked at Anna Claire and for the first time realized that there was a child living with his mother. He was confused. Who was that girl? Why was she there? Teresa, noticing her son's confusion, asked Anna Claire to go play in her room for a few minutes. The girl obeyed, but before leaving, she cast a suspicious glance at Robert. When they were alone, Teresa and Robert sat at the kitchen table. The silence between them was dense, laden with years of resentment, unspoken, words and regrets. Robert was the first to speak. He said he had received a call from someone who mentioned that Teresa was involved in a legal process and that he felt he needed to return to help. He asked what was happening. Teresa, still processing her son's presence, briefly explained the situation. She told him about Anna Claire, how she had found her on the street, about the guardianship process, about the judge's decision, about Charles Henry's support. Robert listened in silence, trying to absorb the information. When Teresa finished, he asked why she had never contacted him, why she had never asked for help. Teresa, with tears in her eyes, replied that she didn't know where he was, that he had left without a trace, without any news. She said she had waited for years for him to come back, to call, to give some sign of life, but the silence had been deafening. And over time she had learned to live without him, to move on, to find purpose in other things, like caring for Anna Claire. Robert, overcome with guilt, asked for forgiveness. He said he had been a coward, that he had run away from problems instead of facing them, that he had abandoned the only person who had always been by his side. He said he didn't expect to be forgiven, but that he wanted to try to fix things, that he wanted to be present, that he wanted to help. Teresa, emotional, said that forgiving him wouldn't be easy, that the pain he had caused was still there, but that she was willing to try. After all, he was her son, and a mother's love, however wounded, never completely disappeared. Their conversation extended for hours. Robert talked about his life in Sheffield, how he had managed to get away from bad influences, about his job, about the simple but honest life he had built. Teresa, in turn, told more details about Anna Claire, about the challenges she had faced, about the legal battle, about Charles Henry and the role he played in the girl's life. When Anna Claire returned to the living room, it was already night. She asked if Robert was going to have dinner with them, and Teresa, after a brief hesitation, said yes. The girl, excited, helped set the table while Teresa warmed up the food. Robert, observing the scene, felt a mixture of emotions. There was a lightness in that house, a harmony he didn't remember experiencing when he lived there. His mother seemed different, lighter, despite all the difficulties, and Anna Claire, with her energy and spontaneity, brought a joy he didn't expect to find. During dinner, Anna Claire asked Robert several questions. She wanted to know where he lived, what he did, if he had children, if he liked to draw. Robert, initially shy, gradually relaxed and answered patiently. Teresa, observing the interaction, felt a pang of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, it was possible to rebuild the relationship with her son. But the tranquility of that night would be shaken the next day, when Charles Henry appeared for one of his regular visits. He had arranged with Teresa to take Anna Claire to the theatre, an activity the girl loved. When he arrived and saw Robert in the house, he was surprised. Teresa, noticing the tension in the air, introduced the two. She said Robert was her son and that he had returned to Birmingham to visit her. Charles, always polite, greeted Robert, but there was a distrust in his eyes. He subtly asked how long Robert intended to stay. Robert, sensing the insinuation, replied that he didn't know yet, that it depended on how things unfolded. Charles, without completely hiding his concern, said he hoped Robert's presence wouldn't cause any inconvenience to Anna Claire, that the girl was finally stable and happy. Robert, feeling judged, replied that he had no intention of causing problems, that he just wanted to be close to his mother and help her with whatever was necessary. Charles, still suspicious, said he hoped that was true and that in any case he would be attentive to any changes in Anna Claire's routine. The tension between the two men was palpable. Teresa, sensing the heavy atmosphere, tried to diffuse the situation, saying that everything was fine, that Robert was welcome, and that his presence would not affect Anna Claire's life. Charles, though not completely convinced, accepted the explanation and took Anna Claire for their planned outing. When they were alone, Robert asked his mother who exactly Charles Henry was and why he seemed so protective of Anna Claire. Teresa explained Charles's role again, emphasizing that he had been instrumental in ensuring she maintained guardianship of the girl. Robert, still processing the information, said he understood, but that he didn't like the way Charles had treated him, as if he were a threat. Teresa, trying to be fair, said that Charles had his reasons for being cautious. After all, he had invested a lot of time and resources to ensure Anna Claire's well-being, and any change in the house dynamics could be seen as a risk. Robert, though still uncomfortable, said he would try to understand. Meanwhile, Charles took Anna Claire to the theatre, but his mind was elsewhere. Robert's presence deeply bothered him. He didn't trust people who disappeared for years and then suddenly returned, especially when a child was involved. He decided he needed to investigate Robert further to understand his true intentions. Upon returning home that night, Charles called the same investigator he had used before. He asked him to do a complete background check on Robert Dawson, where he had been, what he had done, if he had any criminal record, if he had debts, if there was anything that could pose a risk to Anna Claire. The investigator accepted the task and promised results in a few days. Meanwhile, Mrs. Helen, who had been informed by the investigator about Robert's arrival in Birmingham, was pleased. Her plan was working. She believed that Robert's presence would cause instability in Teresa's life and that this could be used to question her ability to care for Anna Claire. She decided to wait for the right moment to act, to use this information to her advantage. In the following days, Robert tried to integrate into the household routine. He helped Teresa with chores, fixed broken things, and tried to build a connection with Anna Claire. The girl, initially wary, began to get used to his presence. Robert had a way with children. He was patient and fun. He taught Anna Claire how to make kites, told stories about his childhood, and made her laugh with his jokes. Teresa, observing the interaction between her son and Anna Claire, felt a mixture of joy and apprehension. On one hand, she was happy to see Robert trying to be a positive presence. On the other, she feared he might disappear again, leaving not only her, but also Anna Claire heartbroken. Charles, who continued to visit regularly, observed everything carefully. He noticed that Robert was getting close to Anna Claire, and this bothered him. He felt jealous, although he didn't want to admit it. He had grown accustomed to being the reference male figure in the girl's life, and now, suddenly, there was another man occupying that space. The tension between Charles and Robert grew with each encounter. There was a silent competition, an undeclared dispute for Anna Claire's attention and affection. Teresa, noticing the situation, tried to talk to both of them, asking them to set aside their differences and focus on what was best for the girl. But male pride is a powerful force, and neither was willing to back down. The situation reached a critical point when, during a school meeting, both Charles and Robert appeared. Miss Beatrice, the headmistress, was confused to see two men accompanying Teresa. She asked who Robert was, and Teresa explained that he was her son. Miss Beatrice, always diplomatic, greeted Robert and began the meeting. During the conversation, Miss Beatrice mentioned that Anna Claire had excelled in a writing contest and that she would like to enroll her in a regional competition. Charles, enthusiastic, said it was a great idea and that he would provide everything necessary. Robert, wanting to participate, said he also thought it was important and that he could help Anna Claire prepare, as he had always enjoyed writing. Charles, visibly annoyed, said that Anna Claire already had all the necessary support and did not need additional help. Robert, feeling challenged, replied that, as Teresa's son and therefore part of the family, he had every right to participate in Anna Claire's life. Charles retorted that rights came with responsibilities and that showing up after years of absence did not give Robert the right to make decisions about the girl. The discussion was about to escalate when Teresa intervened, asking both to calm down. Ms. Beatrice, uncomfortable with the situation, suggested they talk another time when everyone was calmer. The meeting ended abruptly, and everyone left in silence. On the way back home, Teresa confronted Robert. She said she understood he wanted to get involved, but that he needed to respect Charles's role, who had been present when he was not. Robert, hurt, said he was trying to fix his mistakes, but it seemed no one was willing to give him a chance. Teresa, in a firm voice, said that chances were earned with actions, not words, and that he would need to prove he had truly changed. Meanwhile, Charles received the investigator's report on Robert. The information was, for the most part, positive. Robert had no recent criminal record, was employed, and seemed to have built an honest life in Sheffield. However, the report also mentioned that he had been involved with bad company in the past and had left Birmingham after some legal troubles, though nothing serious. Charles, reading the report, felt a little more relieved, but still suspicious. He decided he needed to have a frank conversation with Robert, establish clear boundaries, and ensure he understood that any action that harmed Anna Claire would have consequences. The conversation happened a few days later, when Charles asked to meet Robert at a coffee shop in downtown Birmingham. Robert, curious about what Charles wanted, accepted. When they sat down, Charles went straight to the point. He said he had investigated Robert's past, and that although he had found nothing alarming, he still had doubts about his true intentions. Robert, irritated by the invasion of privacy, said Charles had no right to investigate him, that his life was none of his business. Charles, remaining calm, replied that when it came to Anna Claire, everything was his business, as he had taken on the responsibility of protecting her. He said he would not allow anyone, not even Teresa's son, to jeopardize the stability the girl had achieved. Robert, taking a deep breath, said he understood Charles's concern, but that he needed to understand that Robert also had ties to that family, that Teresa was his mother, and that he had the right to be present. Charles, after a moment of silence, said he wasn't trying to drive him away, but that he needed to be sure Robert was there for the right reasons. The conversation, though tense, ended with a tacit agreement. Robert promised he would do nothing that could harm Anna Claire, and Charles promised he would try to be less hostile. It wasn't a friendship, but it was a beginning of understanding. Meanwhile, Anna Claire continued her routine, oblivious to the tensions surrounding her. She was happy, studying, playing, dreaming. But something bothered her. She noticed there was tension between Charles and Robert, and that confused her. She liked both of them, each in their own way, and didn't understand why they couldn't get along. One night, before bed, Anna Claire asked Teresa why. Charles and Robert didn't like each other. Teresa, trying to explain simply, said that sometimes adults had difficulty understanding each other, but that didn't mean they didn't care about her. Anna Claire, still confused, said she wished everyone were friends, that it would be easier that way. Teresa, touched by the girl's innocence, promised she would try to make things better, but Teresa's promise would be difficult to keep, because, unbeknownst to anyone, Mrs. Helen was about to make her next move. She had discovered through the investigator that Robert had an old debt in Birmingham related to a loan he had taken out years ago and never repaid. The debt wasn't large, but it was enough to cause legal problems if it were collected. Mrs. Helen, seeing an opportunity in this, contacted the creditor and offered to buy the debt. The creditor, surprised but interested, accepted. Now Mrs. Helen had a tool in her hands that she could use to pressure Robert to leave Birmingham, and she intended to use it at the right moment, when it could cause maximum impact. The storm was brewing, and no one was prepared for what was to come. The blow came from where no one expected. On a cold Saturday morning, Robert received a visit from a bailiff in front of Teresa's house. The man, with a serious demeanor and formal voice, handed him a debt collection notice. Robert, confused, opened the envelope and read the content. It referred to a loan he had taken out years ago, before leaving Birmingham. At the time, he was desperate for money and had resorted to a local loan shark. He had managed to pay off part of the debt, but when he decided to leave for Sheffield, he left the rest behind, believing that, with time, it would be forgotten. But now, years later, the debt had been bought by a third party, and this third party was demanding full payment, with accumulated interest. The amount, which was originally small, had multiplied, and now represented a sum that Robert was unable to pay immediately. The notice gave him 15 days to settle the debt, otherwise legal action would be taken. Robert felt the ground collapse beneath his feet. He had returned to Birmingham with the intention of rebuilding his relationship with his mother, of being a positive presence, of proving that he had changed. And now suddenly, the past he had tried to leave behind returned to haunt him. He entered the house and, with trembling hands, showed the notice to Teresa. Teresa, upon reading the document, felt a mixture of disappointment and concern. She knew her son had made mistakes in the past, but she believed he had overcome them. She asked how much the debt was, and when Robert said the amount, she fell silent. It was a sum she could never pay, even with the financial support Charles offered for Anna Claire. That money was intended for the girl. It could not be used to solve Robert's problems. Robert, seeing his mother's expression, felt guilt tighten his chest. He said he didn't expect her to pay, that he would find a way to resolve it. But Teresa, knowing her son, knew he didn't have the resources to pay off that debt. She asked who had bought the debt, but the name on the document was of a company she didn't know. Determined to understand what was happening, Robert went to the address of the company listed on the notice. It was a small office located in a commercial building in downtown Birmingham. Upon arrival, he was greeted by a secretary who directed him to a meeting room. Minutes later, a lawyer entered, a middle-aged man, impeccably dressed in a suit and with a confident demeanor. He introduced himself as Mr. Arthur Foster and said he represented the interests of the creditor company. Robert explained his situation, said he couldn't pay the debt immediately, but was willing to negotiate an installment plan. Mr. Arthur, with a cold smile, said that the company was not interested in installments, that it wanted full payment. Robert, desperate, asked if there was no way to negotiate. The lawyer, after a moment of silence, said that perhaps there was an alternative. He explained that the creditor company was willing to forgive the debt completely, provided Robert met one condition: leave Birmingham and not return. Robert, shocked, asked why they would make such a demand. Mr. Arthur, maintaining his cold smile, said it was not his place to explain the company's motivations, only to present the proposal. Robert had 15 days to decide: pay the debt or leave the city. Robert left the office in shock. He knew this was not a simple debt collection. Someone was behind. It's someone who wanted him away from Birmingham. But who and why? The answer came faster than he imagined. That same night, Charles Henry appeared at Teresa's house for one of his regular visits. Robert, still shaken by what had happened, confronted him directly. He asked if he had anything to do with the debt collection. Charles, surprised by the accusation, vehemently denied it. He said he knew nothing of any debt and would have no reason to do something like that. Robert, still suspicious, said that someone was trying to expel him from the city and that the only person who would have an interest in that was Charles. Charles, visibly irritated, said that if he wanted Robert to leave, he would be direct, not use underhanded methods. Teresa, realizing that the situation was about to spiral out of control, intervened. She asked them both to calm down and to try to think rationally about who could be behind it. It was then that Anna Claire, who had overheard part of the argument from her room, appeared in the living room. She asked what was happening, why everyone was fighting. Teresa, trying to protect the girl, said it was just a misunderstanding, that everything would be resolved. But Anna Claire, more perceptive than she seemed, realized something was wrong. She looked at Robert and asked if he was leaving. Robert, with a heavy heart, said he didn't know, that it depended on a few things. The sadness in Anna Claire's eyes was like a dagger to Robert. He had begun to form a bond with the girl, and the idea of leaving her, of abandoning her as he had abandoned his mother years ago, was unbearable. But at the same time, he saw no way he could pay that debt. He was cornered. Charles, observing the scene, felt a pang of guilt. Although he was not responsible for the debt, he knew that his distrust of Robert had created a climate of tension that did not help at all. He decided he needed to investigate who was behind that collection. If it wasn't him, then who was it? And why did they want Robert out of the city? The next day, Charles called his investigator and asked him to find out who the real owner of the company that had bought Robert's debt was. The investigator, efficient as ever, returned with the answer in less than 24 hours. The company was a front, registered in the name of a strawman, but the money that had been used to buy the debt came from a personal account of Mrs. Helen Barton. Charles, upon receiving the information, felt a mixture of anger and disappointment. His own mother was behind it. She had manipulated the situation, had used Robert's past against him, all to push him away from Birmingham, and consequently destabilized Teresa and Anna Claire's lives. It was a cruel and calculated move, typical of Mrs. Helen when she wanted to protect what she considered her interests. Charles, furious, went to his mother's house. He found her in the living room drinking tea and reading a magazine. She greeted him with a smile as if nothing was happening. Charles, without mincing words, confronted her. He said he knew she had bought Robert's debt and was trying to expel him from the city. Mrs. Helen, showing no remorse, confirmed it. She said she was doing what was best for her son, that Robert was a bad influence, that his presence would only bring problems. Charles, controlling his anger, said she had no right to interfere in his life, that he was an adult and capable of making his own decisions. Mrs. Helen, in a calm but firm voice, said that as long as she was his mother, she would always have the right to protect him, even if he didn't understand. Charles, realizing that arguing was pointless, said she had 24 hours to cancel the debt collection against Robert. Otherwise, he would cut all ties with her. Mrs. Helen, surprised by the threat, tried to argue, but Charles had already left. For the first time in her life, she realized she had gone too far, that she had crossed a line she shouldn't have. But pride prevented her from admitting her mistake. She decided she would not cancel the collection, that she would maintain her position, believing that, in time, Charles would understand that she was right. Meanwhile, Robert remained distressed by the situation. He had considered returning to Sheffield, leaving everything behind again. But the idea of abandoning his mother and Anna Claire, especially now that he had begun to rebuild those bonds, was unbearable. He talked to Teresa, said he didn't know what to do. Teresa, with tears in her eyes, said she didn't want him to leave, but that she also couldn't pay the debt. They were at a dead end. It was then that Charles appeared. He told Robert that he had discovered who was behind the collection and that he was resolving the situation. Robert, surprised, asked who it was. Charles, after a brief hesitation, said it was his mother. Robert was shocked. He didn't understand why Charles's mother would do such a thing. Charles explained that Mrs. Helen had never approved of his involvement with Anna Claire, and saw Robert as a threat to her plans. To distance him from that situation, Robert, processing the information, felt a mixture of anger and relief. Anger at being manipulated, relief at knowing Charles was not behind it. He asked what Charles intended to do. Charles said he had given his mother an ultimatum, but he wasn't sure if she would yield. In any case, he was willing to pay Robert's debt if necessary to ensure he could stay. Robert, touched by the gesture, said he couldn't accept it. He already owed Charles a lot, and he didn't want to feel even more indebted. Charles, with a sad smile, said it wasn't about debts, it was about doing what was right. Marlene, Anna Claire's mother, had been important to him, and he felt that helping Robert was a way to honor her memory. Besides, Anna Claire had grown fond of Robert, and taking him out of her life would be cruel. Teresa, listening to the conversation, felt a wave of gratitude. Charles, despite all the tensions, was showing a side she didn't know, a generous, compassionate, human side. She thanked him, and Charles said there was no need to thank him, that he was just doing what he thought was right. In the days that followed, the tension eased somewhat. Mrs. Helen, after reflecting on her son's ultimatum, decided to cancel the debt collection, not because she believed she was wrong, but because she didn't want to lose her son. She called the lawyer and instructed him to close the case. Robert received the news with relief, but also with the awareness that there were forces working against him, forces that would not give up easily. Charles, knowing his mother had backed down, felt a mix of relief and sadness. He knew that his relationship with Mrs. Helen would never be the same. She had crossed a line, and the trust he had in her had been shaken, but at the same time he was grateful that she had made the right choice, even if belatedly. Anna Claire, oblivious to all the dramas happening behind the scenes, continued her routine. She was excited because the writing contest was approaching, and she had worked hard on her text. Teresa, Robert, and Charles, each in their own way, supported her. There was a tacit truce between the three, an understanding that despite all differences, Anna Claire's well-being was the priority. To the day of the contest arrived. Anna Claire was nervous but confident. Teresa accompanied her to the school where the event would be held. Charles and Robert also appeared, each wanting to show support. Anna Claire, seeing them together, smiled. She said she was happy to have so many people cheering for her. The contest consisted of an essay on the theme of family. Anna Claire wrote about her journey, about how she had been found by Teresa, about how she had gained not only a mother, but also a godfather and an uncle. She wrote about love, about belonging, about how family was not defined by blood, but by choices and affection. The text was simple but deeply moving. When the results were announced weeks later, Anna Claire had won first place. The news was received with joy by everyone. Teresa cried with pride. Charles congratulated her effusively. Robert hugged her and said she was incredible. Anna Claire, radiant, said that this award belonged to all of them, because without them, she wouldn't have a story to tell. The award ceremony was held in an auditorium in downtown Birmingham. Anna Claire went up on stage to receive her certificate and a small trophy. When she asked to speak, she thanked Teresa, Charles, and Robert. She said they had given her something she never thought she would have, a family. The girl's words touched everyone in the audience, and many could not hold back their tears. After the ceremony, everyone went to dinner together at a simple but cozy restaurant. The atmosphere was light, full of laughter and lively conversations. For the first time, Teresa, Charles, and Robert seemed to be in harmony. The differences still existed, the tensions were still there, but at that moment, everyone was united by a common purpose, to celebrate Anna Claire and everything she represented. But the peace would be brief, because, unbeknownst to anyone, Mrs. Helen had not completely given up. She had backed down on Robert's debt, but still believed that Charles's involvement with Anna Claire was a mistake, and she was willing to try one last gambit to make her son see what she considered the truth. Mrs. Helen had discovered, through her contacts, that Marlene, Anna Claire's mother, had a sister living in another region. This sister, named Sonia, had never had contact with Anna Claire, but technically, as a blood relative, she could claim guardianship of the girl. Mrs. Helen, seeing an opportunity in this, decided to contact Sonia and plant the idea that Anna Claire would be better off with her, with a real family. Sonia, a woman in her 40s, widowed and childless, was intrigued by the proposal. She had never known her niece, but the idea of having a child in her life was tempting. Mrs. Helen, manipulating the situation, said that Anna Claire was living in precarious conditions, that she was being fought over by people who had no real connection to her, and that Sonia, as a biological aunt, had a duty to intervene. Sonia, influenced by Mrs. Helen's words, decided to come to Birmingham to meet Anna Claire and assess the situation. Mrs. Helen, satisfied, knew that Sonia's arrival would cause a new earthquake in the lives of Teresa, Charles and Robert, and this time she believed it would be impossible for them to emerge unscathed. The storm was about to restart, and no one was prepared for what was to come next. Anna Claire, who had finally found stability and happiness, was about to see her world shaken again. Teresa, who had fought so hard to keep the girl by her side, would have to face a new challenge. Charles, who had invested so much time and resources, would see his efforts questioned, and Robert, who was trying to rebuild his life, would have to prove once again that he had changed. But in the midst of all this chaos, there was something no one could take away: the love they all felt for Anna Claire. And that love, stronger than any manipulation, more powerful than any law, would be the force that would guide them through the storm to come. The story of Teresa, Anna Claire, Charles and Robert was far from over. In fact, it was just reaching its most critical point, where all truths would be revealed, all secrets would be exposed, and all choices would have consequences. Anna Claire's fate was at stake, and each of those involved would have to decide how far they were willing to go to protect her. In Birmingham, the city that had witnessed so many struggles, so much pain, so many victories, a new battle was about to begin. And this time what was at stake was not just the legal guardianship of a child, but the very meaning of family, of love, of belonging. The answer to these questions would define not only Anna Claire's future, but also the destiny of all those who had chosen to love her. The news of Sonia Christine Davies's arrival in Birmingham came unexpectedly, like a bolt from the blue. It was Miss Lucy, the social worker, who informed Teresa during one of her follow-up visits. The woman, always professional but kind, seemed uncomfortable delivering the information. She explained that she had received a contact from the court, stating that a biological relative of Anna Claire had come forward, expressing interest in meeting the girl and possibly claiming rights over her. Teresa felt the world spin. She had just achieved a fragile but real stability. Anna Claire was happy, adapted, flourishing. And now suddenly, someone from the past, someone who had never cared about the girl before, was appearing to claim rights. She asked who this person was, and Miss Lucy explained that it was Sonia, Marlene, Anna Claire's biological mother's sister. Sonia lived in Glasgow, and according to the information the court had received, was coming to Birmingham to meet her niece. Teresa, her voice trembling, asked if this meant she could lose Anna Claire's guardianship. Miss Lucy, trying to be reassuring, said not necessarily, that Sonia, being a biological relative, did not automatically guarantee guardianship, but that it would certainly complicate the situation. The court would have to evaluate whether it would be in the minor's best interest to be with her biological aunt or to remain with Teresa. The social worker recommended that Teresa contact Charles Henry and, if possible, a lawyer to prepare for what might come. When Miss Lucy left, Teresa sat in the kitchen, paralyzed. Anna Claire was at school, oblivious to the new earthquake approaching. Robert, who had gone out to look for work in Birmingham, had not yet returned. Teresa was alone with her thoughts, her fears, with the overwhelming feeling that everything she had fought for was about to crumble. She called Charles, who answered immediately. Her voice choked with emotion. She told him about Miss Lucy's visit and about Sonia. Charles, on the other end of the line, was silent for a few seconds. Then, in a firm voice, he said he would come to Teresa's house immediately, that they needed to talk and make a plan. Teresa thanked him and hung up, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. Charles had become an important ally, but she knew that, in the end, the decision about Anna Claire's future was not in their hands. Charles arrived less than an hour later, accompanied by his lawyer, Mr. Martin Taylor, a man in his 50s with a serious demeanor and an analytical gaze. They sat at the kitchen table, and Charles asked Teresa to tell him everything Ms. Lucy had said. Teresa repeated the information, and Mr. Martin asked several questions. Had Sonia had any contact with Anna Claire before? Had she tried to locate the girl when Marlene passed away? Did she have the financial and emotional conditions to care for a child? Teresa replied that she knew nothing about Sonia. Marlene had never mentioned having a sister, or if she did, Teresa didn't remember. Mr. Martin wrote everything down and said he would need to investigate Sonia's background, understand her motivations, and assess whether she truly had a genuine interest in Anna Claire's well-being, or if there were other factors at play. Charles, thoughtful, said he found it strange that Sonia appeared now after years of no contact. He asked if there couldn't be someone behind it, someone manipulating the situation. Teresa and Mr. Martin looked at him, waiting for him to continue. Charles, with a dark expression, said that his mother, Mrs. Helen, had tried to push Robert away using the old debt. It wouldn't be impossible for her to be behind this new threat as well. Mr. Martin said he would investigate that possibility, but that, regardless of who was behind it, the fact was that Sonia, as a biological aunt, had rights that needed to be considered. The best strategy would be to demonstrate that Anna Claire was in a stable, loving environment, and that any change would be detrimental to her. Teresa would have to be prepared for a new legal battle, possibly more difficult than the first. When Robert arrived home and heard the news, he was furious. He said he wouldn't allow them to take Anna Claire from Teresa, that the girl had finally found a home, and that no one had the right to destroy that. Charles, appreciating Robert's indignation but maintaining rationality, said that emotions wouldn't solve the situation, that they needed to be strategic and intelligent. That night, when Anna Claire returned from school excited and full of stories to tell, Teresa didn't have the courage to say anything. The girl had dinner, did her homework, watched a cartoon, and went to bed, completely oblivious to the storm approaching. Teresa, Robert, and Charles stayed in the living room, talking in low voices, planning their next steps. Mr. Martin had promised he would start investigating Sonia immediately. He wanted to know everything about her, where she lived, who she lived with, what her financial situation was, if she had a record, if she had experience with children. He would also investigate if there was any connection between Sonia and Mrs. Helen. Charles, for his part, decided to confront his mother again, to find out if she was involved. The next morning, Charles went to Mrs. Helen's house. He found her in the garden, tending to her roses. She greeted him with a smile, but Charles did not return it. He directly asked if she had anything to do with Sonia's appearance. Mrs. Helen, maintaining her composure, said she didn't know what he was talking about. Charles, disbelieving, said he knew she had manipulated the situation with Robert, and that it would be no surprise if she was doing the same now. Mrs. Helen, finally dropping her smile, said, yes, she had contacted Sonia. She said she had discovered her existence through her contacts and thought it fair to inform her about her niece. After all, Sonia was blood family and had the right to know Anna Claire existed. Charles, controlling his anger, said his mother hadn't done it for justice, but for manipulation, because she wanted to distance him from Anna Claire. Mrs. Helen, in a calm but firm voice, said she was trying to protect her son from a mistake. She said Charles was getting too involved in a situation that wasn't his responsibility, that he was neglecting his business, his personal life, all for the sake of a child who had no real connection to him. Charles, in a cold voice, said that Marlene had been more of a mother to him than Mrs. Helen had ever been, and that helping Marlene's daughter was the most important thing he had done in years. Charles's words hit Mrs. Helen like a slap. She turned pale, speechless. Charles, seeing he had gone too far but without regretting, it said that if she continued to interfere, he would cut all ties with her definitively. Mrs. Helen, with tears in her eyes, said that everything she did was out of love, out of wanting to protect him. Charles, in a softer but still firm voice, said that love was not control, not manipulation, and that she needed to learn to respect his choices. He left his mother's house feeling emotionally exhausted. His relationship with Mrs. Helen was completely destroyed, and he didn't know if it would ever be possible to rebuild it. But he had no regrets. He had chosen his path, and he was willing to bear the consequences. Meanwhile, Sonia Christine Davies arrived in Birmingham. She was a simple-looking woman, with short greying hair and modest clothes. Her face was marked by time and hardship, but there was a determination in her eyes. She had booked a room in a cheap guest house in the city centre, and as soon as she settled in, called the number Mrs. Helen had given her, the Courts, to schedule a visit with Anna Clare. Sonia was not a bad person. She had spent her life working as a seamstress, living modestly, in Glasgow. She had been a widow for 5 years, childless, and loneliness weighed heavily. When Mrs. Helen contacted her, talking about a niece she didn't even know existed, Sonia felt a mixture of shock and curiosity. Marlene, her younger sister, had distanced herself from the family years ago, after an argument with their father. The two had never reconciled, and when Sonia learned Marlene had passed away, it was too late to make amends. The idea of meeting Marlene's daughter, of having a connection to the sister she had lost, was tempting. Mrs. Helen had painted a bleak picture of Anna Clare's situation, saying that the girl was living in precarious conditions, being fought over by people who had no real ties to her. Sonia, influenced by this information, felt it was her duty to intervene, to ensure her niece had a better life. But upon arriving in Birmingham and beginning her own investigations, Sonia began to realize that the reality was different from what Mrs. Helen had described. She spoke with court officials, with Miss Lucy, and the information she received was that Anna Clare was well cared for, happy in a stable environment. This left her confused. If the girl was fine, why had Mrs. Helen insisted so much that she needed to intervene? Sonia's first visit with Anna Clare was scheduled for a Friday afternoon in the presence of Miss Lucy at Teresa's house. When Sonia arrived, Teresa greeted her with a mixture of courtesy and tension. Sonia, in turn, was nervous. She looked around the house, noting that it was clean, well-maintained, with clear signs that a child lived there, drawings on the walls, toys organized in a basket, children's books on a small shelf. Anna Clare was called from the living room where she was drawing. When she saw Sonia, she became shy, hiding behind Teresa. Miss Lucy, in a gentle voice, explained that Sonia was her mother Marlene's sister and had come from afar to meet her. Anna Clare, curious, asked if Sonia had known her mother. Sonia, with tears in her eyes, said yes, that Marlene was her younger sister, and that she was sorry for not having been there when she needed her. The conversation was brief and a little uncomfortable. Sonia tried to ask Anna Clare about her life, about school, about what she liked to do. Anna Clare answered. Shyly, but also politely, Sonia, observing the girl, saw traces of Marlene in her. The big eyes, the way she tilted her head when she thought, the shy smile. She felt a wave of emotion, a connection she didn't expect to feel. When the visit ended, Sonia left Teresa's house with contradictory feelings. On one hand, she had felt a real connection with Anna Clare, a desire to get to know her better, to be a part of her life. On the other hand, she had clearly seen that the girl was happy, that she had a home, that Teresa loved her deeply. She began to question whether it would truly be in Anna Clare's best interest to take her out of that environment. That night, Sonia called Mrs. Helen and said they needed to talk. Mrs. Helen, sensing the hesitation in Sonia's voice, agreed to meet her the next day. When they met at a coffee shop in downtown Birmingham, Sonia confronted Mrs. Helen. She said that the reality she had found was very different from what Mrs. Helen had described. Anna Clare was not in precarious conditions, was not being mistreated. On the contrary, she was being very well cared for. Mrs. Helen, trying to maintain control of the situation, said that appearances could be deceiving, that Teresa did not have the means to offer Anna Clare an adequate future, that the girl deserved more. Sonia, looking into Mrs. Helen's eyes, asked what her real motive was for contacting her. Mrs. Helen, realizing that Sonia was not as easily manipulated as she had thought, hesitated. Sonia, in a firm voice, said she would not be used as a pawn in a game she didn't understand, that if Mrs. Helen had problems with her son or with the people caring for Anna Clare, she should resolve them directly, without involving an innocent child. Mrs. Helen, seeing that she had lost control of the situation, tried to argue, but Sonia had already stood up. She said she would make her own decisions about Anna Clare, based on what was best for the girl, not on what was convenient for Mrs. Helen. She left the coffee shop, leaving Mrs. Helen alone, frustrated and realizing that her plan had completely spiraled out of control. In the following days, Sonia continued to visit Anna Claire, always accompanied by Miss Lucy. The visits became more relaxed, more natural. Sonia told stories about Marlene, about their childhood, about their family. Anna Claire listened with fascination, learning about the mother she had never known. Teresa, though still apprehensive, began to realize that Sonia was not a threat, but rather someone who genuinely cared about Anna Claire. During one of the visits, Sonia asked to speak with Teresa alone. Miss Lucy, realizing it was important, agreed and took Anna Claire to play in the backyard. Sonia, with an emotional voice, told Teresa that she had come to Birmingham with the intention of taking Anna Claire with her, of giving her a blood family. But after meeting the girl, seeing the environment she lived in, realizing the love Teresa had for her, Sonia had changed her mind. She said that Anna Claire was exactly where she should be, with someone who loved her unconditionally, who had been present when no one else was. Sonia recognized that, although she was a biological aunt, she had no right to destroy the life Anna Claire had built. Teresa, with tears streaming down her face, thanked her. Sonia, also crying, said she didn't want to disappear completely from Anna Claire's life, that she would like to stay in touch, to be a presence even from a distance. Teresa, touched by Sonia's honesty, agreed. She said that Anna Claire deserved to know her roots, to know her mother's family, and that Sonia would always be welcome. The two women embraced, united by the love they felt for the same child. When Charles learned of Sonia's decision, he felt immense relief. He had prepared for a long and exhausting legal battle, and the possibility of avoiding it was a gift. He thanked Sonia personally, and she, with a sad smile, said she was doing what Marlene would have wanted. Robert, who had witnessed all the tension of the past few days, also felt relief. He had found a temporary job at a garage in Birmingham and was beginning to rebuild his life. Anna Claire's stability was important to him, not only because he cared about the girl, but because he saw in her a chance for redemption, to prove that he had changed. Mrs. Helen, upon learning that Sonia had decided not to claim guardianship of Anna Claire, was furious. She felt she had failed again, that all her efforts to distance her son from that situation had been in vain. But at the same time she began to realize that she was alone, that she had alienated Charles with her manipulations, and that perhaps it was time to reconsider her attitudes. The relationship between Charles and Mrs. Helen remained strained. They barely spoke, and when they did, it was with coldness and distance. Charles had made it clear that he would not tolerate any more interference, and Mrs. Helen, too proud to apologize, kept her distance. But inwardly she felt the pain of separation, the loneliness of having lost her son due to her own actions. Anna Claire, oblivious to all the dramas that had unfolded behind the scenes, was happy. She had gained an aunt who told wonderful stories about her mother, had seen Teresa and Sonia become friends, and felt her family was growing. She didn't fully understand all the complexities, but she knew she was loved, and that was all that mattered. School continued to be a refuge for Anna Claire. Her academic performance was exceptional, and she had become one of the teacher's favorite students. Miss Beatrice, the headmistress, commented to Charles and Teresa that Anna Claire had a bright future ahead of her, that with adequate support she could achieve any goal she desired. Charles, hearing this, felt deep satisfaction. He had invested time, money, and emotion in that child, and seeing her flourish was the greatest reward he could receive. He thought of Marlene, the woman who had raised him with so much affection, and felt that she would be proud. Teresa, for her part, felt that she had finally achieved a peace she hadn't known in years. Anna Claire was safe, Robert was back and trying to rebuild his life, and she had the support of Charles and now also Sonia. Life was still difficult, there were still challenges, but for the first time in a long time, Teresa felt she was not alone. Robert, working at the garage, began to reconnect with old friends who had followed different paths than he had in the past. He realized that Birmingham had changed, that he had changed, and that it was possible to start over. His relationship with Teresa was slowly healing, and he was determined not to make the same mistakes of the past. Sonia, before returning to Glasgow, spent 2 weeks in Birmingham. She visited Anna Claire several times, took her for walks, bought her simple but meaningful gifts. She promised to return soon and to keep in touch through letters and calls. Anna Claire, who had gained not only an aunt, but also a connection to her mother's past, said goodbye to Sonia with tears, but also with the certainty that they would see each other again. When Sonia left, she left Teresa a box of old photographs of Marlene. They were photos from childhood, adolescence, moments Anna Claire had never seen. Teresa promised she would show the photos to Anna Claire when she was ready, when she could understand and appreciate her mother's story. Life in Birmingham returned to a quieter routine. Anna Claire continued at school, participating in her activities, dreaming of the future. Teresa continued her recycling work, but now with less financial pressure thanks to Charles's support. Robert continued at the garage, saving money and planning his future, and Charles continued to visit, monitoring Anna Claire's development, fulfilling the promise he had made to himself. But peace, as always, was fragile, because Mrs. Helen, though defeated in her attempts to distance Charles from Anna Claire, had not completely given up. She had realized that direct methods didn't work, that manipulations were discovered and turned against her. So she decided to try a different, more subtle approach. She began making donations to the school Anna Claire attended, becoming an important benefactor. Miss Beatrice, the headmistress, was grateful for the support, unaware of Mrs. Helen's true motivations. Over time, Mrs. Helen began to visit the school, participate in events, and subtly approach Anna Claire. Anna Claire, who didn't know who Mrs. Helen really was, only saw an elegant and kind lady who sometimes appeared at school and talked to her. Mrs. Helen, in turn, began to form a bond with the girl, always subtly, always without revealing her connection to Charles. When Charles discovered what his mother was doing, he was alarmed. He confronted Miss Beatrice, explaining the situation and asking her not to allow Mrs. Helen access to Anna Claire without supervision. Miss Beatrice, shocked to discover Mrs. Helen's manipulations, promised she would be more careful. Charles then confronted his mother again, this time with even greater firmness. He said that if she didn't stop trying to infiltrate Anna Claire's life, he would take legal action to protect the girl. Mrs. Helen, realizing she had crossed another line, finally backed down, but the resentment between mother and son was deeper than ever. Teresa, upon learning all this, felt a mixture of anger and sadness. Anger that Mrs. Helen continued to try to manipulate the situation, sadness to see that Charles was suffering from his destroyed relationship with his mother. She talked to Charles, said she understood his pain, that she had also gone through family conflicts with Robert. She said that sometimes the people we love disappoint us, but that didn't mean love completely disappeared. Charles, touched by Teresa's words, thanked her. He said he didn't know if he would ever be able to forgive his mother, but that he would try not to let that situation affect his relationship with Anna Claire. The girl was his priority, and he would not allow anything, not even family conflicts, to harm her well-being. Anna Claire, completely oblivious to all these tensions, continued her life with the innocence and joy typical of a child. She was excited because her birthday was approaching, and Teresa had promised to throw a small party. It would be Anna Claire's first real birthday party, and she could hardly wait. Teresa, Charles and Robert began planning the party together. It would be something simple at Teresa's house, with some of Anna Claire's school friends, cake, sweets and games, but for Anna Claire it would be magical. Charles offered to pay for everything, but Teresa insisted on contributing too, on baking the cake with her own hands, on preparing the decorations. Robert said he would help with whatever was needed. The party preparations united the three in a way none of them expected. There was laughter, conversation, a sense of family that went beyond blood ties or legal obligations. It was a chosen family, built on love, respect, and mutual commitment. On the day of the party, Anna Claire woke up radiant. Teresa helped her get ready, putting on the new dress Charles had bought. Robert decorated the house with balloons and colorful streamers. Charles arrived early, bringing the gift he had carefully chosen, a collection of children's books, knowing how much Anna Claire loved to read. Schoolmates began to arrive, accompanied by their parents. The house filled with children running, laughing, playing. Teresa served the sweets and savories she had prepared. Charles helped organize the games. Robert was in charge of the music. It was a scene of pure joy, of celebration, of life. When it was time to sing Happy Birthday, Anna Claire was surrounded by everyone she loved. Teresa, with tears in her eyes, held the cake she had made with such care. Charles filmed everything with his phone, wanting to preserve that moment forever. Robert sang off-key, but with enthusiasm. And Anna Claire, at the center of it all, smiled with a happiness that lit up the entire house. As she blew out the candles, Anna Claire closed her eyes and made a wish. No one knew what she had wished for, but when she opened her eyes and looked around, seeing all those people who cared about her, she felt that her wish had already come true. She had a family, she had a home, she had love, and that was all she had ever wanted.